Hello and welcome back to the ShefF1 podcast. I'm Rudy Brown and joining me as always is Seb Alston and Amy Hammerslide. We have just seen the conclusion of day 3 of the 2025 Formula 1 pre-season test and we're ready to talk all about it. So there's obviously very little to go off from day 3 as it has literally just finished as soon as we started recording. But of the 3 days, let's just go straight into it. Who do we think is the fastest team from testing so far? Obviously very hard to tell, but Amy, I'll start with you because I think we've got a very clear answer.
I think I'd go McLaren, clearly.
Yeah.
But then, again, I don't know, because I look at today and it's not actually that impressive. You've really just got to look at what they're running, what sort of test they're running, and you can't really compare because Ferrari could be doing a qualifying simulation while McLaren could be on a
I quite like
race
that
simulation.
Qualification. That's a nice sort of little blend of the, yeah.
But I apparently last night, day 2 nighttime, when Lando Norris was doing a race simulation, he was apparently 3/10 faster than every single car on the grid, and if that was a race and everyone was on that simulation, he would have finished the race 17 seconds faster than anyone else. So
crazy, man.
But then Oscar's not doing it. So I don't know what they're doing, but I like how they're speaking. And I feel like whenever your team does good, you want to be like, yeah, this is it. This is our year. If they do bad, it's like they're the sandbagging or, yeah, it's fine. So you can't really take testing for face value. But if I had to go off body language as well as the results, I'd say McLaren are probably the most happy with what they've got. Zach Brown saying there's more to it than you know.
Yeah.
Lando Norris looking happy in interviews, and Oscar. So yeah, I would say McLaren for me.
Yeah, they do seem to be the most confident out of everybody sort of within the grid. One of the two teams to keep the same driver partnership as well, so there's less teething problems that will need to, be addressed. Because you've got teams like Williams who have not been putting in very quick lap times, but on the first day, Ocon, new drivers of the team, putting in more laps than anybody else. However, I think that total has just been matched by the day 3 top time setter, George Russell. So Mercedes looking to be a little bit more competitive than maybe a few people would have expected. Antonelli certainly catching a few eyes. Seb, just before we talk a little bit more about him, who do you think is the quickest so far? Would you agree with Amy?
Yeah, I definitely think it's McLaren who seem to be the most confident. It's hard to tell because even though, obviously, as you said, the long runs, McLaren look really quick. We don't know about the engine settings of anyone. And so it is hard to look at. But I think one thing you would look at maybe is the degradation. So you look at how consistent the times are. And Mercedes are one that you would look at and think, doesn't look good. Especially, I think it was day 2. They look really poor when it comes to degradation. But yeah, I think McLaren seem happy. I think Red Bull seem happier than, well, at least from what I've seen from like Max and the way he's spoken about it. He seems a lot more comfortable with the car and seems he said that, he's not going to say how good they are, but they seem, happier with the package they've got. So I wouldn't be surprised if Red Bull, they seem like they're okay. And Ferrari obviously seem pretty happy. Lewis has seemed, he hasn't had really any issues so far and obviously got a lot of laps under his belt. So I think Ferrari, Red Bull, McLaren, they all seem pretty happy. And maybe Mercedes out of those top 4 seem the weakest, but I think that's what we would have expected anyway.
Yeah, I mean, Red Bull, if we just sort of address their approach to testing really quickly, it seems as though they're giving both drivers pretty equal opportunity. Lawson getting the full day yesterday. Of course, there was a little bit of it was the rain yesterday, wasn't it, on day 2?
Yeah, but there was a reason that he couldn't come out, so he didn't do that many laps.
Yeah.
It's something to do with the rain. Don't know. But like everyone else was out. I think there was a water issue with the car.
Yeah, no, there has been a few sort of teething troubles as we've headed into this new season. But yeah, it's not an ideal start for Lawson, especially considering Max had the full day to himself in the Red Bull today. And, a couple of spins here and there, maybe knocking the confidence a little bit, someone with a huge target on his back, but also some security, you know what I mean? Because Isaac Hadjar, we still need to, wait and see what he can do. So I can imagine there isn't that much threat from him yet. He does look pretty competent, though. Isaac Hadjar impressing plenty of people up and down the paddock, and it's nice to be able to talk about him because that RB is just a phenomenal looking car and it looks even better on track. But yeah, in terms of McLaren, if we just sort of quickly cycle back to them, they do seem to be confident, making sure there's no photographers in the carriage and stuff like that, like you alluded to before we started recording. And yeah, they certainly seem to be the quickest. I mean, Ferrari though don't seem to be too far behind. Maybe that is a bit of a push, but Lewis Hamilton settling into life in red pretty quickly. Of course, they're changing their suspensions to match a similar setup to Red Bull and McLaren, maybe closing the gap even further there. But yeah, what did you guys make of Lewis Hamilton's sort of first few days in a Ferrari car as a proper Ferrari driver? Not crashing this time like he did in a little private test a couple of weeks ago, so that's nice to see. But yeah, Seb, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, he seems absolutely fine. I don't think there's anything you take from it would say it looks bad. I mean, obviously look at the timings, very similar to Leclerc when, obviously comparative sessions. So I don't think there's too much I can read from it other than, I mean, you have to look what he's put in the press and how he's spoken. He seems really, really up for this year. He keeps saying that, he's more motivated than ever. I think I saw some really weird quote from him yesterday about like he hasn't got a wife or kids. And, he's different from everybody else. Like he is, the only thing he focuses on in life is winning. Which, I mean, that's quite a good thing to hear. Even it didn't sound like him at all. That was a weird thing to hear from him. But still, good to hear. And, yeah, I hope that... I really want him to do well this year.
Yes, absolutely.
I do hope that people do also take it with a little bit pinch of salt. Like, if he doesn't do well, that doesn't change his legacy at all. I really hope people actually think that. Instead, I'm a little bit worried that if he does do poorly, because, he is 40 years old. It's not like he's, 32 or whatever. Like... I'm a little bit worried that people it's gonna tarnish his legacy a little bit because obviously there's so many new fans or whatever. So, but anyway, back to it. Yeah, I think it looks fine.
Do you think people would judge Charles if Charles can't live up to Lewis Hamilton? It's Charles's team. He's been there for years. It's Ferrari's his home. And then Lewis Hamilton, who is a 7-time world champion but hasn't been in form, does come into the team and takes over. Is that bad for Charles Leclerc?
Who's more pressure on? Is there more pressure on Lewis to come in and perform when he's already got all the titles under his belt? Or is it actually on Charles? Because if he does get, as you said, if he gets convincingly beaten by Lewis Hamilton, yes, it's Lewis Hamilton, but it is a 40-year-old Lewis Hamilton who was toe-to-toe with George Russell at times. George Russell was quicker than him. Yeah. I think it's sort of make or break for Leclerc. I think Leclerc's going to be fine. But
I hope
it's
for him,
there is a bit of a question mark over that, I think, going into this season, which is just exciting, I think.
It's definitely a very hard battle to predict between the two of them. Of course, Leclerc looking pretty quick last season and this Ferrari looking pretty quick in testing now. But I think, do you not think maybe, the gap will be closed a bit? If we are going into the season thinking maybe Charles will have the upper hand, if that Ferrari car is as good as Lewis will hope for it to be, will that sort of level the playing field a bit? Maybe a new experience for Charles, properly fighting at the front of the field for more than half a season. We'll have to wait and see on that one. But I think he'll be okay. I think he's got a very tough test in Charles Leclerc, but I do think that he will, stick it out a little bit. I think he will give it some time. And if he doesn't, then who cares? He's towards the end of his career and he's had a great career. He always wanted to drive for Ferrari. I think, while this was an amazing marketing move and stuff like that, it's now a move that does look like it's sort of making quite a lot of sense. They certainly look quicker than Mercedes, even though, of course, they've been sort of topping the timesheets fairly consistently. George Russell, like I said earlier, has just finished top of day 3 of testing. But one team, if we could just very quickly move on from Ferrari, we might go back to them a little bit later. One team turning plenty of heads in the paddock is Williams. Lawrence Barretto saying they could be at the top of the midfield. Carlos Sainz topping the timesheets yesterday with a full day of testing under his belt. Alex Albon third from top today with 136 laps in the bag, which is just a remarkable performance from him. Head and shoulders above anyone else. I think the next highest is Esteban Ocon on 102, so he's been putting in the mileage as well. But yeah, Williams, I mean, what do we make of them? They've sort of been slowly but surely cooking for a little bit while. Carlos Sainz, a great driver to bring in, especially at this stage of his career, because he was doing some great performances for Ferrari last season. There's definitely a lot of pressure on Albon now to try and live up to the hype of his teammate. Doesn't look to be affecting him too much, though, with a very convincing performance in testing. But Amy, what do you reckon Williams can accomplish this season? Are they the top of the midfield?
Well, when we look at testing, I thought more definitely they'll be fighting maybe with Alpine for that 5th position, behind the top 4, which would be incredible because that's not where they've been at all for years now.
Yeah.
And I was thinking 100% after watching testing, but then James Vowles comes on the telly and he's like, yeah, we'll be definitely fighting for 9th or 10th again. We'll want to get that 9th position. And I was thinking, is he joking? Because how is that a true representative of what's going on? But yeah, he said he was wanting to focus more on next year. But from what I'm seeing, I'm thinking they'll be fighting with Alpine. And I know it's early days, we can't take it as face value, but with that lineup as well of Carlos Sainz and Alex Albon, it's not another driver who's a rookie for Alex who he doesn't have to compete with. He's settled. He actually has to put in everything. And he absolutely should, and he is that sort of driver, and Carlos will push him, and I think that's going to be an amazing dynamic for the both of them. Don't think they'll fall out. I just think it'll make them both work harder.
Definitely.
And it should push up the Williams team as a whole. Like, they'll move as one, and that's what James Vowles has been saying. We're a team. That's all that matters. We're not individual drivers. So yeah, hopefully that's the case for Williams, and we actually see them move up the table rather than what we've seen in recent years.
Yeah, it will be a very interesting dynamic because it's a sort of a very, unfamiliar one for Carlos Sainz. If you look back to sort of his time at Ferrari, he and Charles were fairly evenly matched in terms of, their I suppose raw pace and performance, and there was just certain things that separate the two of them in sort of very different ways. Carlos was a lot better at maybe more surprising races and stuff like that. Charles maybe had much better raw pace and stuff like that. But for me, I think Carlos's time at Ferrari can be viewed very, very positively, especially with that first season when Ferrari were nowhere near where they wanted to be and just got better and better and better. A few race wins for Carlos here and there, but it will be a new dynamic because they sort of went into that situation at Ferrari sort of being the guy that people were expecting to lose, not significantly to Charles, but it was going to be very tough for him. And then you look to before that at McLaren, he was the team leader. Norris, coming in as a rookie initially, and then before that, gosh, where was he before that? Renault, and that was just a very stagnated part of his career. And then Toro Rosso, a little bit of a different sort of situation when we talk about team dynamics, driving for a junior team, and what was definitely a junior team at the time, not just a bit of a stopgap for drivers to try and make it to Red Bull and then not make that step up. But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Seb, do you think Carlos can have the upper hand on Albon this year? Do you think he could be the man to lead the team to some sort of success in the midfield?
I definitely could do. I won't say whether I think he will until our predictions.
Okay, yeah. Coming soon.
Yeah, I mean, it's Carlos Sainz. We know how good he is, especially in the midfield, and obviously for Ferrari. Like, I think he's a lot more of a proven talent than Alex Albon. There's still loads more question marks over Alex Albon. I do think Alex Albon is going to be up there and competing at least with Sainz. I'll say who I think will come out later. But for Williams as a whole, I would maybe be a bit more tentative about where I think they're going to be. I know obviously the times are quick and stuff like that, but I still think even though they look like they have a strong package, and all the murmurings as well around the paddock. So I think it was Andrea Stella and Lando Norris as well also spoke about. I think he spoke about Alpine and Williams, but mentioning Williams in that bracket, I mean, obviously compared to what James Vowles has been putting out, saying that they're just fully focused on 2026. Yeah, it's a little bit. I'm not sure, but I don't think they're going to have made as significant of a step forward as the other teams, just because it doesn't make sense for them to actually focus on this year. I don't know why they would. Obviously, maybe from a financial point of view, but other than that, I think it is fully on 2026. They would have promised Carlos Sainz, look, Carlos Sainz isn't coming to that team for 2025. He's coming for 2026. Yeah. So he wouldn't really want them to fully focus on this year. I don't think the people within the team will actually want them to fully focus on this year. Obviously, if they're good this year, I mean, it's not a bad problem to have. But yeah, I just don't think they're going to make as good of a step forward to really compete with Aston Martin, who I think are going a little bit under the radar. I think they seem to be. I think they're quite happy with actually how they're doing. I think they look like they're maybe the best midfielders that I'd probably say at this point. Still, I think they've made a bit of a step forward. It just depends on how they develop over the year. Because
they needed to really. It's sort of long overdue, a genuine improvement to performance, because they've just sort of been stuck at that same level of pace. And so as the people around them have gotten a lot quicker, they've just sort of stayed at the same level. And that is obviously not to the liking of Fernando Alonso, who could be on the move if that trend does continue. Because, we know what he's like. He's here, there and everywhere, if it's not to his perfect standards. And rightly so. But yeah, no, I like what you're saying about Aston Martin. I mean, the timings to begin with weren't, enormously convincing, but then Stroll put in a decent time yesterday, and yeah, look, it is hard to predict, because obviously testing, like Amy said before, you can't take it at face value, not even a pinch of salt. You've got to take everything with an enormous sort of lathering of salt. With Carlos Sainz putting in the quickest time yesterday, only 0.2 off Max Verstappen's pole position time this time, not this time last year, but basically this time last year on the Grand Prix weekend. But of course, this track is a little bit quicker in terms of the weather conditions and stuff like that. So yeah, like I said, huge pinches of salt being taken with all this testing time. But yeah, look, it's been interesting so far. I think if we can just briefly talk about Haas, because it's been an interesting strategy from them in testing, being miles off the pace, so it seems, with their overall finishing times. But of course, giving Ocon a really good chance to get to terms with the car. Esteban Ocon, I didn't realise this until I sort of had a look at the grid and all the drivers on the grid. He is now one of the most experienced drivers on the grid. We're coming up to 10 years of Esteban Ocon in F1. Okay, give or take a couple of seasons out. But yeah, how do we think Haas will get on? Because they've sort of been quietly confident in making sort of changes in and around the team. You know, stuff like increasing the pit wall size and making changes to their suspension and stuff like that. Do we have any expectation for them? I mean, Ocon's just put in a really good time to take him into the top 10. But you know, it's someone that, you know, it's a team that, you know, hasn't really had much focus around them and Sauber as well, to say the least. But yeah,
I mean, last year we've really seen a progression with Haas. We've seen so many races where they were actually getting so many points, and I think that was a lot to do with the driver line up as well. They were so experienced, Hülkenberg and Magnussen, and obviously now we've got a brand new driver who's never driven for them before with Ocon, and then we've got a rookie in Ollie Behrman
who scored points for them last season,
who has raced for them, is probably the more experienced. Well, he is the more experienced driver with this team.
Yeah, it's so crazy. Yeah,
but yeah, I feel like that was a massive help last year, was the lineup between, you know, the experience between the pair. And now they haven't got that. But like we said, there's more people working for Haas now. There's a bigger pit wall. It's not just free, you know, and it's going to build up that momentum of people wanting to work for them, more money because they finished higher up in the constructors. So that goes hand in hand, but I have not been impressed by them so far in testing. And I'm not going to, you know, again, take it for what it is. I'm going to wait until that first you know, practice, let's say in Melbourne, but not been impressed by Haas so far. But I hope they prove me wrong, because I really like Ollie Behrman and I wish Esteban Ocon the best.
Yeah, I mean, it's safe to say they're sandbagging just a little bit, but they were one of the two teams that brought intermediate tyres to this testing session, and it did rain, so a bit of a genius stroke from them. But Seb, as someone who, if I'm right in saying, isn't an enormous fan of Esteban Ocon, I do want to ask you how you think he will compare against Ollie Behrman.
I actually think he's going to do really well. I think this team suits him perfectly, and I think Haas are once again going to be right in that fight with Alpine, with Aston Martin, as they were back in the last season. And I know obviously testing, you know, the times haven't been impressive or whatever, but even Ocon today, I mean, this is the first time they've actually put on like an actual performance run, and he's straight in the top 10. They've done exactly what they did the last couple of years, or last year actually, where they just completely focused on long runs. That's all they've been focusing on, is long run. And that, you know, obviously in the past it was their degradation issues, which they sort of fixed last year, but fully focusing on that, I don't think that's a bad thing to do. At the end of the day, the race is so much more important than qualifying, and if that's what they want to focus on, get as much data as they can as possible, not worry about what other teams are doing, just focus on themselves. I think that's a smart way to go, and I think that Aikamatsu, I can't fault what he's done, because what he did last year was incredible. And I think Haas are going to be up there once again. I think I can't see why they wouldn't be. I think Ocon, I think, is an incredible driver. I think Ocon is underrated, and I actually really hope he does well, because then it makes Pierre look good as well. But I think people are sort of writing him off a little bit when it comes to him and Behrman. I've seen a few people predicting that Behrman's going to beat him or whatever, but I think Ocon, I mean, he's up there in that caliber of top tier midfield drivers. Yeah. I think people forget that, you know, he finished P2 in Brazil on merit last year. He could have easily won that race.
P3 in Monaco the year before.
Yeah,
as well.
like he's one of those drivers in the midfield that knows how to get podiums. Yeah. And people, you know, rate someone like Hülkenberg so highly, but or Tsunoda as well. But Ocon is one of those drivers that he capitalizes on situations like that. And Hülkenberg, even though he's great, he doesn't do that.
I mean, this is a race winner we're talking about here.
Exactly. Like I think people just sort of sleep on Ocon a little bit, and I think he's going to do really well this year.
Well, apologies, Seb, I was wrong. That was a glowing review of Esteban Ocon there. But this is a driver who, you know, just under 10 years ago now was touted as one of the top talents in F1. You know, Mercedes, you know, making sure they kept a hold of him after he left. Force India. There we go. Honestly, they've gone through so many names. It's so hard to keep up with now. And don't get me started on Sauber, Jesus Christ, and their car as well. I mean, did you see the car on track? It was just so depressing,
gradient is horrific.
Awful. It looked quite nice at the F1 75 launch.
Yeah, no, at the launch I was like, ooh, and then on track it's been terrible. Bortoletto looked fuming in the garage.
Yeah, once again it's just one of them F1 My Team liveries, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just like put together in 2 or 3 minutes.
Get Audi in as soon as possible.
So, can I ask a question? You mentioned Mercedes. Do you not rate them then, from what you're seeing?
No, I think I'm not sure about Mercedes, and I think that the murmuring's coming out of them, because that's what I'm sort of more focusing on, is like what the sort of like the body language, as you just mentioned. I don't think it seems that positive coming out of Mercedes. I think actually it's been positive in terms of Antonelli. I think that's been one of their positives about how
that's where I was going to go with that.
I mean, he hasn't crashed. I think that's what I'm looking at
in
terms of it. But yeah, he seems to be on it, and obviously they've got fastest today. But I don't really look at that at all and think anything from that. Like, because when it comes to Melbourne, Williams aren't going to be P3 when it comes to it. So
no. I mean,
and Haas aren't going to be right at the bottom either.
I mean,
exactly.
Kimi Antonelli, they shown a graph when he was in the first session with Charles Leclerc, and he was 4 tenths ahead of Charles going into the final corner, and then he just dropped. And Crofty was saying he believes that he was sandbagging there because he didn't want to top the chart.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting, but that was a trend last year where Mercedes did do well in qualifying and did awful in races.
Yeah.
So what they could have been doing, a qualifying simulation, and they do look fast, but like you said, the degradation, I feel like that's where Mercedes just haven't improved once again. And how repetitive is it getting? And someone like George Russell will get sick of this. He'll have to leave, in my opinion.
I'd also say they've got probably the weakest of the top 4 teams in
Yeah.
terms of a
Yes.
driver partnership.
Yeah.
And that's not me criticising Russell. I think he's great, but I think and Antonelli as well could be incredible. They could have the strongest.
Yeah.
They could turn out, but in terms of proven, like
give it 3-4 years, and
then they could be right up there. But you look at McLaren.
Lawson's had 11 races.
Yeah, exactly. He's got some running under his belt, and we know what sort of to expect from him. And then they've got Verstappen, Red Bull. McLaren have got obviously 2 great drivers. Ferrari have got 7-time world champion and Charles Leclerc. So I think that could be. I think Mercedes are going to be bottom of that 4 when it comes to this season, at least at the start of the year. Obviously, time will tell about how good Kimi Antonelli is, but. Yeah, I'm a little bit pessimistic when it comes to Mercedes.
Yeah, no, I can't blame you there. And but Antonelli did surprise and impress a lot of people in this testing session, simply because I think I was watching an F1 sort of key takeaways and what we learned from it and stuff like that. And Alex Brundle pointed out that his line through turn 4 was just so consistently on the apex each and every single lap. I mean, his consistency and just how he's able to just stick to the exact same line each and every time. It's amazing racecraft and maturity being displayed by someone that is literally 18 years old.
Baby.
I mean, I struggle to still wrap my head around it. When I went to Silverstone last year, and I was watching the F2 sprint race. I mean, he was just head and shoulders above the rest of them in the wet, and taking different lines as well. And he's I can't wait to see the finished product that Kimi Antonelli will reach and will become, because there's no doubt in my mind that he could be. He probably is a future world champion. I mean, let's be real. He's got. We could see him in 20 years' time winning the world championship, which is just utterly bonkers considering he's already in F1.
Yeah, he won in Budapest too, and I just felt myself cheering for him. I love Ollie Behrman, and obviously you've got maybe like that British thing, but like I do really like Ollie as a person. But Kimi, I just love him because I think because he's so young and everyone wants to like discard him, and I just think that's the next Max Verstappen. How he came into the sport so young, so baby faced, and Kimi's more so like Kimi looks 16 if anything, and I'm just so excited for him, and I'm more excited to hopefully hear a lot of Italian national anthems being played.
I mean, he could be a character from a racing film. Do you know what I mean? He could be in the new F1 film coming out this year, but it's just that he's an Italian racing driver that's extremely young and extremely energetic and excited with a name like Andrea Kimi Antonelli. I mean, I said this sort of this time last year when we were doing our predictions, and he's just. I think surely the sky's the limit for him, maybe even further. But that is about enough for Mercedes. Now, I do want to talk about Sauber briefly, even though there isn't a lot to say. It's just, it's
depressing.
There's not a single positive to take from it, really. Apart from Bortoleto looked reasonably competent, and it's nice that he's got these grievances about the team already, despite the fact that he has just come in with a lot of pressure on him, obviously being the F2 champion, looking really, really solid in his junior career, not just in F2, but sort of earlier than that as well. Do we have any major expectations for Bortoleto? Hulkenberg, a nice teammate to have when you first enter the sport, someone that, doesn't really get involved in a lot of drama, someone that has so much experience and someone that knows how to drive well in the bottom end of the midfield. He's sort of, drawn one of the longest straws there in terms of first teammates to have in F1.
I think he's beatable, though. I think we saw from Behrman last
year. Yeah, absolutely.
That he is beatable.
Even Magnussen, no disrespect to Magnussen, of course, but they were on a much more level playing field than many anticipated. But you've also got to take into account the fact that, for whatever reason, I felt like every single year last year in a qualifying session, Hulkenberg was somehow in Q3 each and every single time. Hence why that could be the reason why Haas haven't really impressed us so far with their timings, at the end of the session, because qualifying isn't really an area where they need to improve. But yeah, that's Haas and this is Sauber. Look, it is bleak. It is depressing.
Yeah. I mean, Hulkenberg's only there because it's going to be Audi.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and then Bortoletto, that's why I feel like he could, because this is almost like a nothing year for Hulkenberg.
Yes.
He wants that car and he hopes that, Audi can give it him straight away, which is really like aspirational. I don't optimistic, but I think. But yeah, Bortoletto has every chance then, because he has nothing to lose, and I don't think, though, because of what we've seen last season with Bottas and Zhou Guanyu, I don't believe either of them will be getting points, and if any of them does, it will be Hulkenberg, because he's proved time and time again that he can get in them points positions.
They did make a step up, though. I think we've got to say at the end of last year, obviously Zhou getting points. And
yes.
That was in a bit of a freak race, but still, like they did make a step up. They were a lot more competitive compared to where they were at the start of last season. And I actually think for Bortoletto, it's actually quite a good thing that they're going to be terrible, because the pressure is off him.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
if he'd been coming into Kimi Antonelli, there's so much more pressure on him. There's so much more pressure on Lawson than there is Bortoletto on Doohan even. Well, I mean, there's a lot of pressure on Doohan. But
yeah.
Like for Bortoletto, it is like, and because Hulkenberg's a well-respected teammate, even if he does get beaten kind of convincingly, like there's not much on the line for him this year. I think it's a perfect way to go into the sport. Is you're not going to get any points, and you're up against a teammate who is relatively beatable, but also is expected to be better than you. I think that's the perfect way to come into the sport.
I mean, there's no doubt it sort of mirrors how George Russell entered the sport. Success in F3, success in F2, comes in, into the team that will likely be the slowest on the grid. And okay, sure, I would much rather have Nico Hulkenberg in my team than that version of Robert Kubica. But like you say, there is absolutely no hype around Bortoletto in comparison to the other drivers, despite the fact that he was the F2 champion last year. So yeah, I think that's a really, really good position to be in as a driver. And yeah, fingers crossed for Bortoletto it does go well, because I do hope to see some success from him there. Okay, so that's pretty much it for testing now. We'll just do a little whip round of stuff that's happened in and around F1, sort of in this winter break. Actually, no, saying that, tell a lie. Esteban Ocon has been making complaints about the new cooling vests that the FIA have been trying to implement onto the drivers. And this came as a result of the Qatar Grand Prix, of course, when that one there, Logan Sargent near enough fainted. Logan Sargent, that seems like a real thing from the past now. That's rip, bro. Anyway, but yeah, complaining that there's like a sort of tennis ball thing attached to his hip to try and cool him down. Fascinating stuff, as always, from the FIA there. But some genuinely more interesting things. We have got a new restriction, I guess, if you want to call that, for the Monaco Grand Prix. Each team now forced to make 2 mandatory pit stops, which, I don't know about you guys, but I'm pretty sure we can all agree that that is a really, really good step in the right direction to make Monaco a more interesting Grand Prix weekend. But would either of you argue maybe 3 pit stops would have been a little bit better, or is that a little bit overkill? I'm just sort of maybe playing devil's advocate a bit there.
No,
I feel like you like to argue.
I think 2 would be fine. I think maybe I would like to see maybe more changes. I obviously understand that he's going down the route of it being a bit gimmicky. And
yes,
it's like, this is like a one-off event that's going to be completely different to everything else, which feels a bit weird. But then also, I don't really mind, to be honest. I think at the end of the day, F1 is an entertainment sport, so I think it's fine. I think this is hopefully the first of more changes, to be honest. I think obviously maybe change to the qualification format about, obviously got a ridiculous amount of cars on track at one time.
Yeah, one-shot qualifying would be awesome if they were to introduce that.
Would be cool. Splitting them into different, 2 different sessions like they do in F2, I think.
Yeah.
And then other changes for the race, I don't really know, to be honest. Go-kart race, that'd be cool. But other than that, I do really like the 2-stop thing, though. I think that it will make a difference in terms of, because I think the worst thing about the 1-stop around Monaco is that because the pit stops are the most important and the most exciting bits when it comes to races, more often than not, unless there's crazy weather like we saw a couple of years ago, it ends up being that if there is a crash, which is exciting, it ends up meaning that basically it's a free pit stop and then the pit stop's done. Whereas now, even if a crash happens and you get your free pit stop, you still have to make another pit stop, and I think that's the good thing about it. I would have liked it if they'd made it you have to go all 3 compounds if it was a dry race.
That would have been hilarious.
That would have been interesting to make a really like different
Yeah.
dilemma for the strategy.
I
but-
think they would have all protested that, though. I think that's sort of asking a little bit too much from the teams. But it's the FAA, and no one can do anything about it. I mean, they fined that rally driver for saying one swear word in a post-race interview. So that's also a huge talking point, a big talking point from F175, the car launch event. Now, Amy, you decided to watch all of that. I have to admit, I was a little bit busy that evening, so I had to give it a miss. But what were the main takeaways from that?
Well, we definitely had some booing, I'll say
Yes.
that, for Max Verstappen, Christine Horner, and of course the FIA got booed.
Yeah.
Which Carlos Sainz has now become a director of, the
The Grand Prix Drivers Association, yes.
So he, since that's happened, so that's kind of interesting. But of course, a lot of fans wanted to let their voices be heard. The actual event itself, Jack Whitehall actually did a good job. He actually made it funny, and I really liked that interaction because even like Max had a giggle. He joked about the argument between him and Russell, joked about Charles Leclerc, and it just felt quite nice actually. I would argue that it was kind of long, the actual intros for the cars, some of them, like Alpine.
Oh my god.
Oh my
DJ.
god. Oh my god, I wanted it all to end at that point. But
I did stop watching after that.
Yeah. Well, I had to wait for the very last one for McLaren.
Yeah.
So, but the actual event I've thoroughly enjoyed, and people are talking about like next year, but I hope it's more like a special event thing.
Yeah.
Every 5 years, maybe 71. So F1 88. It doesn't need to be every year. But Max Verstappen has said if there's an event next year, he won't be going, especially if it's in the UK.
No, I think that's fair.
Wow.
I don't know why they would boo Max. I understand.
love
I
Max,
understand
yeah.
Christian.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Red
Bull.
Bull themselves, maybe because they employ Christian, but
Yeah.
Max, like
The
come
boos weren't terrible for Max, but they were definitely present. But if you go Silverstone, it's exactly like that. And I'm
Yeah.
sure if you ever go Zandvoort for Lewis, it's probably a bit like that.
Yeah.
Not so much probably as because Silverstone, I was like, whoa. But I feel like if I wore Red Bull merch, I probably would have got like shouted at. But if you go Zandvoort, I reckon it's similar. Like there would be booing for
I
Lewis
do feel
there.
like a race, it's different though. I feel like when it's that sort of like away fans or whatever, but then just booing someone when they're just sitting and all like it's like
He's coming to an
ceremony
event.
thing, like-
Yeah, it did feel like the Hunger Games.
Well, they say F1's like a big pantomime, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
So, pantomime villain maybe in Max Verstappen, and I mean, who knows what to call Horner, but I think we'll probably get in trouble if we use any of the appropriate terms. So let's move
It
on.
did pleasantly surprise me, though, and I would recommend if they did it again. But some of the music acts, we'll move on. But they need to also move on from their music acts.
What about the cars? What did everyone think of the liveries?
RB, my
Really?
God, what a car!
V-carb. You're a
V-carb,
fan?
yeah, it's beautiful.
V-carb.
That for me is
It
what
was
a
a
racing
good
car should look
introduction.
like. Yeah, it was a beautiful car. I mean, did you see Isaac Hadjar's face as they took off to unveil it? He was just like, "Oh yeah, that's nice." But I'm in total agreement. I think that is
Definitely the best.
yeah. It's not necessarily the prettiest.
It just looks nice.
It
It's
just
just
looks
cool.
awesome.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
awesome,
yeah.
innit? It's what a race car should look like.
I don't hate, but I don't like Ferraris. I don't like the white. It's too much white, and I love a classic Ferrari with the red. And it's been the last few seasons where it's been in that classic, like that text Ferrari at the back. And it just looks so vintage, so beautiful, and it's just too much. And I feel like
IBM on the back.
they've been trying to get too many sponsors on.
Yeah,
They've been trying to get the HP to blend in nicely, the blue background, like the blue with a white background, and it's just not worked. And I'm not a fan at all, but. McLaren, yes, really like it.
I liked it on track. It looked really, really sleek on track. Just again, it was what they think they wanted the 2017 car to look like. Do you know what I mean? If that makes sense, it's just how that should have turned out. Rather than being a bit of a battery, but I do like the McLaren. It does look, it just looks like a car that can go and win a championship.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
hopefully.
They have dressed to impress. I want to slightly disagree with the Ferrari, but I completely get that there is a lot of white on there. But for me, it's a nice enough scheme and a nice enough design that it just about works for me. When I first saw it, I was like, you know what, that is all right. But I do know what you mean. It's sort of the text with the Ferrari. You know, if you remember back to when F1 went to Mugello and they had the special livery for that. I mean, it wasn't the nicest looking car in terms of that weird burgundy colour and all the yellow and stuff like that. But there were certain elements like the sort of more retro looking Ferrari text on the car that I think if they took some elements from that and then sort of applied it to this car, it could have been a very, very nice looking car. And we touched on it earlier. The Sauber did look really nice, and they haven't managed to sort of translate that to the car on track.
It's
it's
so
just
bad because it goes from being black and then into just carbon, and you can tell the difference.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
it looks washed out and just. Oh,
Washed.
sour.
Yeah, I
washed.
think that sort of paints the picture for this
Yes.
season for them, really.
Did you enjoy the Aston Martin?
I like it. I like it a lot.
Did you see the video though? How they revealed it?
No, I stopped after Alpine.
He did a James Bond-esque,
Oh,
and
yeah.
he almost filmed it like Fernando and Lance were like diving, parachuting into the O2, and then they turned up in the crowd. It actually was really good, and I really loved that.
Hey, I mean,
fair.
there's no new Bond announced yet. Maybe that's
No, it's Fernando Alonso.
yeah, Fernando's next
That's
career
it.
job.
He's
Maybe
announced it there.
Johnny English instead, he could be.
That's maybe Lance Stroll, but yeah.
I thought the car just looks worse, to be honest.
Yeah.
With the Madden on I think Aston Martin, I didn't think it looked that good. What about Alpine? Anyone?
I think.
Yes, I like Alpine.
I'm in
Less
favour.
pink.
Bring on the pink, man.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it
like
looks
it.
good. It looks good.
I thought it was more blue. Like I like the blue on it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I hate the pink on it, but like I actually enjoy this car.
I do
like
miss a pink car.
Is it almost like a different shade blue?
No, I think it is still sort of the Alpine blue.
There's something more electric about
it. Yeah, that's what I
It's quite
mean.
nice.
But definitely that sort of more futuristic look, I'd say it's got going for it there. But I do miss a pink car on the grid. I do miss the days of Force India and Racing Point where it was just this pink splodge sort of being where it shouldn't be. But yeah, it was. I like the Alpine a lot. I mean, in terms of the other teams, I mean, Red Bull, more or less the same. Same goes. I mean,
Mercedes is quite cool.
Yeah.
I actually quite
Yeah.
like it.
Yeah,
I think
it's
it looks
alright.
quite
It's
cool.
got
alright.
the nice, because I prefer the carbon on the Mercedes, but they are the grey arrows as well. So I
Yeah,
feel like they show both of it. So obviously Red Bull is the exact same as usual.
I thought that Haas looked all right.
I thought it looked nice.
looks
yeah.
just nice and sleek.
It looks nice, but it
Looks like a Haas car.
I mean,
So-
it's a damn sight better than because I'm only bringing this up because he was actually spotted in the paddock during the testing weekend. But that your old Carly livery they had when Dimitri Mazepin was in charge, he was spotted in the paddock
Was he?
during pre-season testing. Yeah, because apparently his son is a budding go-kart driver, hopefully better than obviously not. I'm talking not Nikita's younger brother here. Nikita's younger brother is a budding go-kart driver, and fingers crossed he's a little bit better than his brother.
Get
but
back.
yeah, I mean that there's also that issue of do you really want the Mazepin name back in Formula One as well? But maybe in a few years the climate is a little bit different. But I think the less said about them, the better, really. In terms of anything else before we
Drive
wrap
to
up,
Survive
Drive to
trailer we
Survive
just
trailer,
watched,
yeah.
just come out.
If you haven't seen it already, they have just brought it out. It'll be on Twitter and YouTube and stuff like that. It does look a damn sight better than what they produced last year. And like you said, Amy, better season. It's going to be a better series to Drive to Survive. But yeah, so much to talk about there. I mean, what episodes are we looking forward to the most?
I'm looking forward to Alpine.
Of course, yes.
I know everyone else hates those two. There were two of them last year, but other than that, I mean, there's so much. I mean,
papaya rules for me. That's going to be interesting because the whole conversation's on the radio. You're
Yeah.
actually going to see what happens behind the scenes.
That'll be what the episode's called, I think.
Papaya rules. Yeah, I can see it already.
Christian Horner.
That's
I
box
forgot
office.
that it was this
Me too,
season.
Yeah, that'll be absolute box
Hamilton
Oh,
office.
Ferrari
that
looks
coming
good.
out. Lewis, yeah. That I can't wait, honestly. And then the whole the whole seeing what Carlos was going to do because obviously appendix came out. Then he found out he was having to leave, and then he agreed to go Williams.
Yeah, roller
It
coaster
felt
of the
at
season.
the time a downfall from grace.
Yeah.
But right now, I'm really loving. Carlos looks happy. He's comfortable. And if you see in the picture actually that was released at the beginning of testing, Carlos was front and centre.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Yeah.
yes, Carlos. And and I loved that Williams overalls. Absolutely loved them. But yeah.
Danny Rick, completely
Yeah.
forgot about
Danny
that.
Rick.
that's
Great.
just
I
escaped
can't
me
wait
as
to
well.
cry. I can't wait to cry. Colapinto.
Yes, that'll be great as well. I think there'll be a lot on Jack doing. I mean, in the trailer, Flavio Briatore,
Yeah,
I
Jack
can't
doing as
wait.
well,
I mean,
yeah.
you'll need subtitles for him. The guy's barely audible now. But Flavio is, again, box office. And I do think, do you reckon they'll make any mention of the F1 film? I feel like there could be a little bit of a funny spin there. Because of course it's Apple as well doing it, not
true.
Netflix. So there could be a few digs in there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, true.
But I mean, it'll be interesting to see if they do sort of bring that in, because the drivers will have an opinion on it. Yeah, just get away. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I remember when I was at Silverstone, they were doing some filming there, and it did look really interesting the way in which they were producing it. And then I did see something. I don't know if it was a joke account or something like that, but apparently there's teasers for maybe another one coming out in further down the line. I might have
They
been.
have been filming so much.
Yeah,
It feels like they're at
exactly.
Every single Grand Prix. They must have a lot of footage. Surely they could make a second one just like that.
I mean, will it be good? Do you think?
No.
Oh,
I
okay.
think-
Wow.
I mean, it just
The
looks
film?
so corny. Like
I'm really excited.
I'm
And
excited.
I was like that, but now I'm like, actually, the way they're talking about the producers and how they've put together this film, they have worked really hard for it. And, like, it is probably going to be the most realistic film we're ever going to get of F1.
Yeah,
I think
so.
in some of the camera work, I think it's going to be
Yeah,
great. I
it's
just
just
think
the storyline.
plot,
Yeah.
having actual
I know what
drivers
you
in
mean.
it, and I just can't get that clip of him collapsing in the middle of the race.
Mine's in Abu Dhabi when Charles and George were on the podium.
Yeah.
Oh,
because
they
they forced them to redo it, didn't they?
Yeah.
That is. I mean, they must have been furious
Charles
with
had
that.
to celebrate after missing out on the constructor with Ferrari.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, could you imagine? That's just. Yeah. We got to make a film, Charles. Sorry, you know what I mean? He's just I want to go away.
I just hope there's no actual driver acting. If there
Yes.
Oh, I hope there is. That would be
I
hilarious.
do hope there is, but for the film's sake, it's going to be so bad. It'll be great, but it'll be horrific.
Yeah.
I mean, Ted Kravitz was offered a role, but he turned it down. I can imagine
Really?
well, Brad Pitt did say in like I think it was a Notebook episode. I can't remember which race it was, but it was a Notebook episode, and he got talking to Brad Pitt in the God, what's the, is it AXGP or something?
Yeah.
So he got talking to him in their pit box, as it were, the set. You know what I mean? And he offered him a few lines. So I feel like, and he turned him down because he's not an actor or whatever. But I feel like they would have done that with a few people.
Yeah.
So
Will Buxton.
well, he's jumped ship completely now.
Yes.
So he's off to IndyCar. But of course, he was around last season. But anyone who do we want to see in there if they have got people in
Danica
that?
Patrick.
Oh no, please no.
No, thank you. Out of all the drivers, I would love nothing more, and it won't happen, but the Max Verstappen trying to act. I think it'd be hilarious.
Logan Sargent.
I'm crossing my fingers for a Kimi Räikkönen post-credit scene. That would be brilliant. If we get a post-credit scene, that would be
Teasing a
hilarious.
sequel as these like the new old drivers come back for the film. Like,
Yeah. If they do a historical one, I don't know how they would obviously do that, but I mean, of course, all the cars are still there. So I mean, if we get some like sort of history films and stuff like that, but you are right, it will be the most accurate in terms of the way it's produced, I'd say, because it's gonna have so many like candid
Angles
shots and like
yeah.
onboard cameras and stuff like that.
Fully learnt to drive a F2 car.
Yes,
So
yeah.
they roll. So yeah, it's going to be as genuine as possible. It's just going to be the love story side of it. But I guess that's the movie part of it, isn't it?
It'll be what the real haters of Drive to Survive think Drive to Survive is.
Yeah.
I guess it will be a tough watch in parts, and it will be corny, but it will be cool.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got to bear in mind this is Apple as well. This isn't just some like independent film company that
Yeah.
somehow wrangled their way onto the F1 grid. Yeah, there's a big budget here.
They've got all access to their free F1 race, and there's some independent company.
Hasn't Lewis got a role in it though? It seems
thought
like
It wouldn't
his
shock me, but he's a
his
producer on it, yeah.
yeah. So if he's producing it, apparently he has got a role in it.
Thing is, I like Lewis, but he does strike me as a sort of person that thinks he's good at everything,
And
I don't think he's going to be good at acting.
It's rapping.
And I think he's going to think he's good. He can do
Yeah.
acting. They've had a few classes out in like New York or something like that. I think, I can be this like actor as well as a musician. And it's going to be horrific.
This is great for TikTok clips, by the way. I think this is going to be
Sorry,
great.
I do like you, Lewis.
Fingers crossed he doesn't see all this. It's nothing
Yeah.
personal, of course. You've got no idea who we are. But yeah, but that just about sums it up, unless anyone else has anything on the agenda. But I'm pretty sure that is us done. Apologies for the delay in content. We have just been very busy, to say the least. But yeah, we should be rattling out some more videos very soon. I've said that every single time, and then we've taken some big breaks afterwards. But F1's back soon, so ShefF1 will be back soon. And thank you very much for sticking around if you have made it this far into the video/podcast. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one, which will likely be our pre-season predictions. That is not an easy word to say at the end of a recording. And if you missed the ones last year, then you'll know. Then you won't know that these are usually some of the best videos that we do end up doing, if I do say so myself. So yeah, make sure you stick around for our predictions coming within the next couple of weeks before the season starts. Don't worry about that. But yeah, thanks very much for watching. Thank you to Seb and Amy for joining me as always. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.
Bye.